How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Mars on Drop 1000. Today is June 25th, 2020, and today we're primarily going to focus on the possibility of Tropical Storm Edouard forming in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean later next week, and we'll also discuss about these Kelvin waves that are coming off the Central American coast and could form in the Eastern Pacific. So let's begin with this by looking at the Atlantic water vapor imagery as of right now, and you can see that it's mainly quiet. We don't have really any low pressure system that's organized in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic as of right now. We do have an upper level low that's currently located probably over Cuba, and you could somewhat see the rotation with this upper level low. We see some of these clusters of thunderstorms moving towards the south, and then we see clusters of thunderstorms over Hispaniola starting to move more to the north. So, which really defines where this upper level low is currently located. And we also see the dry air, which is usually associated with upper level lows. Thankfully, this has pretty much no chance of developing because there's just a lot of Saharan dry air and dust that pretty much blew all the way from the the western coast of Africa all the way to the Caribbean. That's inhibiting tropical cyclone development at the moment, and that should hinder this upper level low from becoming anything more than just an upper level low, since there's just too much dry air that's going to inhibit any sort of thunderstorm development or convection within this upper level low to make it into a surface low pressure. And other than this upper level low that's currently located in this area, we also do see a lot of convection occurring just south towards the Gulf of Mexico, just to the south and east of Texas as of right now. And we're seeing those clusters of thunderstorms move into Louisiana and Mississippi. But fortunately, this doesn't seem like it's gonna develop into anything tropical because a lot of these thunderstorms are enhanced by the fact that there's currently a trough that's centered over western Texas that's enhancing a lot of this thunderstorm activity. So it isn't really tropical in any sort of way as it's being enhanced by instability that's currently located towards New Mexico and western Texas. So this isn't going to be associated with any sort of tropical cyclone development. And it's also, and a lot of this convection is also enhanced by this ridge of high pressure that's currently right over the Yucatan Peninsula, I should say. And since we're seeing a lot of wind move over the Gulf of Mexico, that's creating a lot of convection within this area as the air molecules spread out when when it's over the Gulf of Mexico, and that allows the air to hold a lot more water, since in air molecules that have more energy within them, they move around more, and that allows and that gives the atmosphere more space to hold more moisture. And this moisture is rising up as a result of instability from western Texas. So no tropical cyclone development is expected from these clusters of thunderstorms as of right now. And in terms of wind shear, there's currently a lot of wind shear that's pretty much inhibiting tropical cyclone development all throughout the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean as of right now, because we're seeing this ridge of high pressure located over the Yucatan Peninsula bring pretty much west winds all throughout the Gulf of Mexico. And since during hurricane season, winds should usually go come from the east during hurricane season to enhance hurricane development. The fact that the winds are coming from the west due to this ridge is inhibiting tropical cyclone development, because it's pretty much going, these winds are pretty much going against what the usual winds are for the Atlantic, for the middle of the Atlantic, which usually comes from the east. And these winds from the west are currently inhibiting a lot of tropical cyclone development that's currently that's currently over the Gulf or the Caribbean as of right now. And we're also seeing that wind shear get enhanced by this upper level low, which is also bringing west winds going against the trade winds that usually bring winds to the east that would enhance tropical cyclone development. But we're seeing those winds mainly from the west. The only areas where it currently is maybe favorable for tropical cyclone development is just off the coast of the southeast, where this upper level low is bringing winds that are currently going from coming from the south and east, which would enhance tropical cyclone development. However, there isn't currently any low pressure systems at this time to where a tropical cyclone to develop. So overall, throughout the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, there's a strong wind shear. There's a lot of dry air thanks to the Saharan dust that moved all the way through the Caribbean, which is inhibiting a lot of tropical cyclone development. And there isn't really any low pressure system that could form into any sort of tropical system. However, that could change in the near future. If we take a look at the Saharan air layer, as of right now, and you can see that Saharan air is just swallowing up the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, which is inhibiting tropical cyclone development. And this is where in June, where most tropical cyclones would usually form. And since the Saharan desert dust is currently over this area, there's no tropical cyclones that have a chance to develop over the next 5 days. However, that could change, I would say probably by next week, because as this ridge over the Yucatan Peninsula moves more towards the northwest, we could see an area where there's going to be less wind shear, since this high pressure won't have as much of an effect of bringing northwesterly winds over the Gulf, which would go against the trade winds, which would usually bring winds from the east southeast. And that could allow tropical cyclone potentially, or tropical storm Eduardo to form going into next week, right around Independence Day. And we'll also see an upper level low begin to move more and more towards the Pacific as this high pressure moves north, as the high pressure is likely going to steer this upper level low to the eastern Pacific next week. And that could allow for a more open area to where a low pressure system could develop into Tropical Storm Edouard. That's what I meant to say. I didn't mean to say Eduardo last time. But let's currently take a look at the upper ocean heat content, and pretty much for the rest of the summer, this won't be an issue when it comes to developing a tropical disturbance over the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, since you see the upper ocean heat content quickly warming up as we're getting more and more into the summer and into the hurricane season. So that won't be a problem when it comes to potentially Tropical Storm Edouard forming. And if we take a look at the GFS for what it forecasts and why it may forecast Tropical Storm Eduardo to form, let's currently look at the 200 millibar wind speed forecast. So actually, first let me show you the current cyclonic vorticity signature to show you guys where exactly the GFS is currently predicting where Tropical Storm Edouard would form. And if we take a look, this is as of right now. Obviously, there isn't much cyclonic vorticity besides some of these cluster of thunderstorms that are currently just to the southeast of Texas, but that's due to bronclinic influences. If we move a little bit forward in time, I would say right around Independence Day, if we continue to move on, this is as of July 1st, 2020. We still don't really have any strong vorticity signatures in the Gulf and through the Caribbean just yet, but it's going to quickly change as we move forward over the next several days, as we see a piece of energy begin to form by July 3rd, just a day before Independence Day. And this is something that I was worried about for the past several weeks, because we've been seeing a lot of convection over Central America for pretty much the past several weeks. And And at the time, I said I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of tropical development in this area, since we're seeing so much convection that I believe that when the conditions were right in this region, we would see tropical cyclone development. And the GFS is currently stating this going about 8 days out on July 3rd that we'll see something develop just off the coast of Central America. If we continue to move forward, the GFS continues to bring that energy towards the Yucatan Peninsula and potentially impacting the southeast United States. However, keep in mind, I'm going far out, like 10 days out. So at that point, it becomes pretty much a guess when it comes to forecasting something 10 days out. But let's say we go about to a forecast that's easier to predict. Let's say July 1st, which is about 6 days out from now. We see energy begin to form in Central America, and that could form into Tropical Storm Eduardo if the conditions are right. To determine if the conditions are right, there needs to be several factors that have to occur for Tropical Storm Edouard to form, as we'll take a look at the 200 millibar wind forecast for the GFS, which is pretty much the vertical wind shear, which is pretty much represents the vertical wind shear that's going to be currently over the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. So as of right now, we see a lot of wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico, and we see a lot of wind shear extending all throughout the Caribbean, and we do see light wind shear as of right now over this is correct. So yeah, we see a wind shear just swallowing the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean right now. And if we move forward, there might be a chance that the wind shear will die down because a ridge will form in this area, bringing southeast winds, which will coincide with the average surface trade winds that would pretty much bring winds from the east and the southeast throughout the Gulf of Mexico, and that could allow for tropical cyclone development, since there won't be too much wind shear or vertical wind shear or change of wind direction within height over the Gulf of Mexico, since we're going to see surface more southeast winds over the Gulf of Mexico. So if we take a look right now, here's a ridge currently just to the west of the Yucatan Peninsula, bringing a lot of wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a trough over Texas, also enhancing that wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico. And this upper level low as well is enhancing wind shear. But as we move forward, that high pressure begins to move more and more towards the north. And I think it's the result of this trough that's certainly gonna bring this ridge a little bit more north, as it pretty much digs in and pulls this ridge up north, as we're gonna see a plethora of troughs pretty much dig in throughout the west coast of the United States. But however, that wind shear will continue as it moves up to the north, as we're still going to see winds primarily come from the north, which will go against the trade winds, which usually bring winds to the south and east. But also that upper level low will also move to the south as this ridge continues to move up north, as the ridge as winds will change over time as this ridge moves north. So the upper level low will be forced into the eastern Pacific, and as we move forward, the wind shear continues throughout the Caribbean. But there's going to be a point where you see a ridge build in just off the coast of Florida, and we see pretty light wind shear over this area, and we do see a piece of energy actually move to the south going into June 29th, as this ridge is bringing north winds throughout the Gulf of Mexico. And as a result, we may see pieces of energy from these troughs dipping in through the United States move into the Caribbean, which may allow just enough energy to where we might see tropical disturbance form in the Caribbean. So as we move forward into July 30th, that energy moves over Cuba is what the GFS is currently predicting, and then a ridge begins to form. A ridge begins to form as occurs, and that brings pretty favorable conditions over the eastern Gulf of Mexico as right now, because the winds are coming from the southeast, which coincides with the trade winds and will potentially enhance tropical cyclone development. And as we move forward, that ridge steers that low pressure system to the north, and this ridge that was currently over Mexico that was bringing a lot of wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico moves more to the west, which allows a more open area for this trough to potentially develop over the Gulf of Mexico. However, again, we're going far out in this forecast. A lot of things could change in this forecast. Like, for example, maybe this a ridge over this area will potentially move more to the east, which will pretty much continue to swallow the Gulf of Mexico with vertical wind shear, which would otherwise inhibit tropical cyclone development over the Gulf of Mexico. Or this ridge might not form at all, and we're going to continue to see dips in the jet stream that will bring a lot of wind shear over this area. And also, we can't rule out the fact that there's still a lot of Saharan desert air over the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, and we'll have to see how long that Saharan desert air stays within the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, because that could be potentially a huge thing that could inhibit this storm from ever developing. So more of the chances this forms, it's still very uncertain. The GFS is taking some sort of tropical disturbance to form just off the coast of Central America, while the European is still reluctant to form this thing, and we'll take a look at it right now. So yeah, this is the current vorticity signature map, and it isn't really developing anything just off the coast of Central America. If we continue to move forward, this is June 30th, June 31st, July 1st, July 2nd, July 3rd, and yeah, we're still seeing nothing. Maybe a little bit of energy probably just off the coast of Costa Rica and Panama, but the GFS, the European isn't really favoring any sort of development with this, so there's still a lot of uncertainty. If both the computer models were expecting some sort of tropical cyclone development, then that means we'll maybe be a little bit more certain that something will develop. But as of right now, it's still uncertain. But we'll definitely have to keep in watch of this ridge that's currently over the Yucatan Peninsula, because if it moves just far to the west enough, and if a ridge develops over here and it's stronger than normal, then we definitely could see Tropical Storm Edouard form next week. But there's still a lot of factors we need to check over the next several days, and that's definitely important to watch. And anyways, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and make sure to share with friends and family who are interested. And I hope you guys have a good day.